Hi everyone, Elle Hackney here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I love to interview everyone in the book world, whether it be authors, illustrators, podcasters, industry professionals. And today I have the most amazing poet who's written a
Oh,
book
thank
called Urban Legend Hunters through Larrikin House, and I've been dying to talk to him all about it. His name is Joel McKerrow, and I'd like to say thank you so much for joining me today.
My absolute pleasure. It's good to be here.
Joel, there's so much to unpack because you're a poet and you've written so many books, but Urban Legend Hunters is not poetry. Is this correct?
No, well, I mean, in some ways it is. So I've been a full-time poet for the last 15 years, touring performance poet and doing lots of different things. And then just over the last few years have really gotten into children's fiction, into junior fiction. And so Urban Legend Hunters right here.
Yes.
Very exciting. It's like smushing together a whole lot of different things. So it's a graphic novel, um, which you'll see there, but um, it's also narration too that weaves into it that is quite poetic. So even like I'll just read just a little tiny start for you. Frank Forrester looked back, a mistake. It's always a mistake. Anyone who looks back, you just know they're the next ones to end up with their brains squished out of their noses like jelly, or their toes chewed on like gumdrops, or their bones munched like how your uncle crunches on that last bit of chicken, which is so gross, by the way. So that's the tiny first little bit of the thing. So it's like it's an adventurous, creepy, wacky, hilarious story, but my writing is always poetic because that's where I come from. And so I've kind of interweaved these things within it.
If that doesn't make everyone run out now and grab it to know what happens next, I don't know what will. What an opening. Wow. So, how
Oh,
many
thank you.
minutes did it take for that to be the opening of your graphic novel?
How many edits did it take? I think I would have gone through about 3 edits myself. And then I went through probably 2 edits with, went through an edit with I reckon 3 edits with the publisher as well. So one kind of structural edit and then 2 more in-depth edits. And then there was probably a polishing edit on top of that. So I don't know, what's that? 7 or 8 edits, I think, to get it to where, and that was just the manuscript. And then all the illustration happens on top of that. So that's another kind of drafting of the illustration and the layout and the design, and then taking that to the final product is another edit, I suppose you could say. So lots and lots of edits.
Wow. So lots of work has definitely been involved with this graphic novel. And so,
Yeah.
how did you come up with the concept? Because the concept is awesome.
Uh, Thank you. Well, actually, so the idea is, so there's this old cranky man named the Dreaded Mr Snipe, and the urban legend goes that he's the old cranky man who lives beside the school campsite. And when footballs get kicked over the fence, he comes out with a samurai sword and cuts those footballs in half, and perhaps if a student jumps over the fence, maybe they too also are disemboweled in some way. So the urban legend goes. So there's a group of kids who are sitting around telling these urban legend ghost stories. And then the next day, a ball, of course, goes over the fence and adventure ensues. But for me, where it came from, the inspiration for this, so I was flying up to actually, and I can tell this story in a bit, flying up to Storyfest, so Somerset Storyfest, big literary festival in Queensland on the Gold Coast, which is where I met the publishers. And as I was flying up, I had this, just, you know how you have those random memories, and whenever just of things that have happened in your life, scattered things, as you're sitting doing whatever. And I was on the plane. I just had this memory of our old cranky neighbor that lived beside our house growing up. And us kids, if we kicked the ball over the fence, we'd have to dare each other who was going to go and get it. Because if we jumped over the fence and he saw us, he would come screaming out like this old cranky man. And so, as I think all premises begin with crazy stories that end up becoming something, I started thinking, so what if from this memory, what if it wasn't just an old cranky man? What if it was an alien or a monster or an urban legend creature disguised as an old cranky man? And the story then blossomed from there.
Man, bedtime must be epic in your house with those stories.
My kids do like it when I read them or tell them crazy stories, definitely.
I love it. And I'm absolutely triggered by that because everyone would go, how much does that ball mean to us back in like 1986?
Yes, yeah.
Willing to let that go. No, so I love it. Please tell me that you're making a series out of this, or is it a standalone story?
No, it is a series. So there's 5 in the series. Larrikin House is the publisher. So they've signed for the first 2, and hopefully the first 2 will go really well. And we'll get to do the whole 5 in the series. Would be amazing. So this one's called The Dreaded Mr Snipe, and then the second one is The Hideous Mrs Mortimer, which we're up to second drafting with the publisher with, and then the third one is Grisly Ghost of Mary Throat that I'm currently working on the first draft of.
Oh wow! So with the series, did you have to pitch it as a series, or were Larrikin good to go with a standalone, or like how did you do that?
So the story of how I pitched it is quite interesting because I had that memory, as I said, when I was flying up to Somerset Story Fest. So because I've been a poet for many, many years, I get to go to lots of different festivals and conferences, performing and talking and sharing and all that kind of stuff. And was that going up to this one? I think it was like the first festival after all the after COVID lockdowns, etc. And so I went along to this festival and just sat down in the green room with these 2 people who ended up being Danny V, Words and Nerds podcast, and Larrikin House, and James Layton. And they were telling me about Larrikin House and said, oh, we always love taking on new people. Have you got anything to pitch to us? Have you got a thing that you've written to pitch to us? And I was like, yes, I do. I'll pitch it to you tomorrow. So then I went back to the hotel room that afternoon and I wrote it from from that little tiny memory. I went back to the hotel room and I wrote like a 1,500 word kind of picture book, junior fiction-ish kind of story about who this could be. I took that to them and wrote the pitch. I took that to them, pitched it the next day, and they loved the idea and said, "What if we did it as a graphic novel?" And I was like, "Yes," because I'm obsessed with graphic novels. And so the idea of taking that and then, so basically, I wrote it then over the next few months from 1,500 words to like 15,000 words. I think it ended up being something like that. But that's kind of how it started, as this moment of me, which for any writers who are listening, I've thought a lot about that moment afterwards, because the reason why I could say that is because the last 12 years, I've written a poem every single day is my creative practice. And as a poet and allowing myself to write that poetry, most of them being bad, because the only way to write good poetry is to allow yourself to write bad poetry. Same as stories. The only way to write good stories is allow that crappy first draft. But I had worked hard at being able to run with whatever's in front of me. And so taking up little opportunities and looking back, I've thought a lot about it since, as I said, because I look back and my poetry career kind of started similarly with me being invited randomly to stand up and perform at a poetry thing one week and going, yeah, I can do that. I'm going to jump up and do it. And even before that, I was a photographer and randomly was invited to take some friends' photos for some friends' weddings. I'd been doing a few photos just by myself. They saw them. I in no way was a photographer. They said, could you come and do our wedding? And I said, sure, I'll do it. And then I went and bought a digital SLR and became a photographer for a few years, and then poetry for the last many years, and this. And so I say that now because I think like looking back over my career and over my writing, it's that whole idea of you need to be prepared to be lucky. Like luck, we often see people who get the opportunities, get the publishing contracts or whatever it is, and we're like, oh, they're so lucky. But actually, it's the hard work of many years of preparing yourself, getting damn good at your craft so that you can take up those opportunities. Anyway, that's a big rant from me about things.
No, I'm actually going to refer to you as the poetic James Bond for a minute, because, like you said, when you said, right, I'm going to give this photography thing a go, you went out, you bought a camera straight away and you made that happen. And then you met Danny V and James Layton from Larrikin House, and they're like, pitch it. You're like, right, zoom off like Superman to the hotel. It's right, that pitch. It seems like you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to make that happen. But also, I believe a lot of serendipity is also part of it. Like, imagine if you didn't have that. Like, gosh, like that plane ride is, it's pretty, it's like a pinnacle point, really, isn't it?
It's amazing. And again, when I look back at so many of like all the different connections, and I, as a poet, I kind of get to tour the world and I do lots of different things. I get flown places and do things. And I look back at all these things that I do, including now this publishing thing, and the serendipitous nature of it is amazing. Like that there is this, I think we can put ourselves in the like serendipity in the sense of not waiting for things to happen, because I don't think things work like that. I think, but you can put yourself in the place of serendipitous things. You can be prepared. You can work hard at your craft, and so you can grab hold of those serendipitous opportunities and run with them when they happen and see what happens. So that's what I try to do. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. But can I chew on your poet side, if I may, please?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
So you mentioned you've gone all around the world with your poetry. Is this correct?
Yes, yeah. So all over.
Okay, the reason why I ask is I've had so many authors, because a lot of like I'm aspiring, okay, and a lot of my people who watch my channel are aspiring, and we've all been taught that writing in rhyme and all that is really hard to translate to other languages. So just on a broad spectrum, but please tell me your experience, because you're 15 years in and a globetrotter. I would love to know.
Yeah. Well, beautifully, actually. So one of the beautiful experiences in terms of translating my work that's been lovely. I was just over in the Netherlands last year and the UK doing two various festivals. And the festival in the Netherlands in Amsterdam was one that I went to years and years ago. Like 4 or 5, maybe 4 years before I went last year. And I'd performed there. So I kind of do spoken word poetry. And often I do it with a band as well. So I have music backing to my spoken word poetry. And I performed there, and the poem that I did was one that's kind of a welcome home to the artists and the creatives and to those who have forgotten that they are so. And the festival was kind of a creative arts music festival, spirituality, social justice, that kind of thing. And they loved it and they ran with it. So much so that they took the poem and they translated it into Dutch, and then they got it blown up the size of like huge, like I don't know how big, but a big side of kind of a whole house kind of idea, massive. So that as people drove into the festival the next year, there was my poem as massive in front of them, essentially saying "Welcome home." That's what the name of the poem is, but welcome to this festival, creatives. And so they took it. They took why I say that is I just love that as this little translation moment of taking the English and converting to something else. They loved it so much that they ran with it, and they had a few people who translated it. And of course, I have no idea how good the translation is, but I've loved getting to travel the world. I've done lots of different places with poetry, and as well I did kind of an 18-month trip, maybe 12 years ago, something. Yeah, actually, it was 12 years ago, because that's when I started writing a poem every day, was when I went on that trip. Did an 18-month trip around the world, going kind of from place to place, hooking up poetry gig, and was doing the individual world poetry slam championships and a whole lot of different stuff. So I've many scattered different experiences from all over the world. Yeah.
So what you're saying to aspiring writers who love writing in rhyme, that don't be too turned off, because you can have it translated and you can have your books on the international stage just because they're in English rhyme. Is that correct?
Yeah, totally. And what I'd say as well as a poet is I always encourage people to push their rhyme. In other words, often we we think that rhyming is just kind of rhyming couplets, that the last word on each line rhymes, and we often get, and that forces you into a certain way of rhyming, or whether it's A B, or whatever you kind of think, or limericks. It forces you into certain rhythmic. A lot of my poetry is more free verse poetry, but scattered through it is what we call internal rhyme structure. So it's not that the final word on each line rhymes, rather the rhymes are scattered throughout the lines of the poem. So it's much more, it's what hip hop, that's what rappers use, that kind of idea. So instead of being forced to go rat, cat, or you get to a strange word, courage, and you're like, oh, maybe like forage, and you force a rhyme in there. And I know we've all forced rhymes into our poetry. Doing it's slightly different, allowing yourself to, instead of the last words rhyming, perhaps the last word rhymes with the second word, which rhymes with the fifth word on the next line, and then that first word rhymes with this word. So one of my poems, it begins, he writes poems beneath the underpass, and he wonders how fast they'll cast him this time, as just another fat dope, no hope, too much skin, never going to be thin. He's about to begin another school, another day, another way that he wished he could melt into the pavement.
Please tell me you do poetic workshops. Please tell.
I do lots of poetry workshops. Yes, that's one I often do in schools. So I go into lots of schools doing poetry workshops.
Oh, because I was just going to say, like, I really hope they're up for anyone to sign on, because that's kind of opening another level to what some people may know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think, and I love it when I read, even if we're talking picture books and things like that, there's probably a bunch of book writers here who use rhyme. My encouragement would be change up the line structure and see if changing things and bringing the rhyme into different places, just in the flow, just kind of see what happens, see what it does to your writing. And often then when you come back to rhyming couplets or rhyme at the end of the line, you'll kind of be better at it if you get out of that mindset for a little while and just have a play with rhyming in an assonance. Repetition of the vowel sound is assonance, what we think of with rhyming. Yeah, have a play, see what happens.
No, that's great. So I'm going to just rewind. You mentioned this is the what rappers and what have you use.
Yeah.
Do you dabble in the music industry there, Joel?
No, not well. I do, but not in terms of I'm definitely not a rapper. A lot of my poetry I mean, spoken word is all about the musicality and the lyricism and the rhythm of it. And so certain rhythms that I tap into start to sound like rap. And what I always tell students as well, even if you're just talking, all you need to begin to do is start to emphasize certain syllables now, like you sound like you're rapping, but really you're just speaking, and you just drop out of that and you can speak normally. And so like tapping into rap is quite an easy thing to do. I love kind of working with musicians, just often not to a specific syncopated beat, as rappers do with a beat behind them, but I have a band called Joel McKerrow and the Mysterious Few. So I'm the kind of the frontman poet of this band. And if you look on my Spotify, Joel McKerrow and the Mysterious Few, if you look up Spotify, you get to hear it. Yeah, I'm sure it's on all the things. I think it's on all the things, various ones of my stuff. And so you'll hear it's like acoustic folk rock poetry, I suppose you could say. So definitely not rap, hip hop, but it's what I love to do. Yeah, it's fun.
Wow, that's a journey and a half. I think, wow, there's so much that's come out of the urban legend hunters book through Larrikin House. So tell me, you must have other books available then.
I do. Yeah, I do have a few different books. So I'll show you some here. This is the latest one that I brought out for kids: Story Beats and Rhyme Drops, Poetry for Young Peeps Like You is what it's called. So it's kind of for upper primary, maybe not as young as some people who might be listening, but it's for upper primary and junior high kind of age.
But we act young. I mean, that counts, right?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And so what I always do with my poetry as well is always have QR codes. These ones in here link to my videos of me performing various poems so that kids can read it. They can watch the videos on YouTube. And then it also has a bunch of prompts as well. So little exercises with space for them to write their own poetry in it. So it's kind of a poetry exercise book. And then this is my latest one for adults called Even Lost Things Glow, Poetry for the Misplaced, which is a compilation of poetry that I've written over the last few years. That's kind of, yeah, poetry for those who feel lost in life and like they're in a dark place and need something, need some hope, need some light in that dark place.
What was your inspiration?
Yeah, that's for this one.
Yeah.
Well, it's scattered poems from the last few years, really from when I've been in hard places, and need light, need hope, need whatever I needed. Often I write my poetry I mean, not often, always. I write my poetry for what I need first, for what I need to work through and think through and engage with. And so there's a bunch of them that are from kind of the early years of my kids when I have two, a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old now, but obviously the thick of parenting and touring and having toddlers, that life can get pretty hard and difficult at times. And so there's a whole lot of poetry, kind of parent poetry about that kind of stage of life, but also about loss, about wrestling with spirituality as well, which is one of my other books too. I'll just show you this last one, Woven, A Faith for the Dissatisfied. It's a bit more, it's not a poetry straight book. It's a book more about my life and growing up within kind of conservative evangelical Christian world, and then my journey through that and discovering what it means for me to be a white upper class, like middle class, upper class heterosexual man in this world, all the privilege and the bias of all of those things and what that looked like. So it's a book that essentially that wrestles with I suppose the crumbling and deconstruction of my own faith and understanding of the world, and how I reconstructed my life and spirituality and what that looks like. So and a bunch of the poems, so there's poetry in that as well, but then a bunch of the poems are kind of around that as well, when life when the shit hits the fan and life disappoints and expectations are not met. What is that? Where do we go?
Yeah,
where
expectations. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And
for a lot of us, I think, and where do we go? What I found, like, I've gone to poetry and to writing. That's been my my therapy and my catharsis. Not to say don't go to therapy, but it's been my catharsis and my way to work through the all the realities of life. I think if I hadn't found poetry all those years ago, and I found it in the midst of going over to, I was over in the midst of doing some work on the border of Thailand and Burma, and saw some really full-on things, and needed a way to process through those things. And I remember sitting there writing one night, and it came out as poetry, and it just allowed me to breathe deeper. And that's what it always has been since then.
Wow, Joel, thank you so much for being brutally honest. I really do appreciate, and your journey seems raw, and it just seems from the heart and true. And I love that you've actually done something with what you found as therapy, which is your writing and your poetry. Because but it's amazing for you what it's done for you, because speaking at the beginning of our interview, it was poetry and crazy people next door who take soccer balls, and then like international travel. And totally. Now you tell me the beautiful roots of it. So it's like what was darkness, you've definitely come into some sort of light. And I love that you're also encouraging others to do the same as well. So where to from here though? Because you've got some beautiful books.
I do. I have lots of beautiful books, and I have lots of beautiful projects on the go. So I'm the kind of person who has, I've got my whiteboard up there, and it has at least 10, maybe 15 different projects that I'm working on. I'm a little bit crazy like that. And I just...
It's good.
It's good. It's good. So up there I've got a bunch of more junior fiction and middle grade fiction and graphic novel series that I'm writing and pitching, and lots of different things in that world, kind of three, maybe four different series that I'm writing in that world. I've got more poetry because I'm still writing constantly every day, as I said. And so more poetry stuff that I'm working on, a poetry album which my singer and main musician, main collaborator has just had her second kid. So that's got a little bit of pause on it. So for me, where to from here? I'm loving where all the junior fiction and middle grade writing is taking me, and I'm doing lots of. I mean, I've always done lots of schools work, but I'm doing lots of kind of upper primary schools work now, going in with the graphic novel, and junior high with the graphic novel and poetry. And my plan is to keep on writing these things, and I know. Like rejection is part of the course, and will continually be for all of us writers. I remember the year, which year was it? It was probably 10 years ago. I think I hit my triple digits of rejections within a year, which I kind of took as a really good thing. I think I had a bunch of acceptances as well. But I think the only way I see that in my life and in others' lives that kind of they pick up at once again where we started, those beautiful opportunities that come to us, is by being willing just to create and put yourself out there again and again and again, and not have it tied so closely to your identity that rejections mean you just crumble, but rather go, that's okay, that's fine. And so I think learning how to be with rejections is a really good thing. And I'll keep on writing and keep on submitting, and I'm putting things at the moment to various publishers. I got new things happening with Larrikin House as well, and I'll finish this graphic novel series with them. Hopefully we'll get to all 5. There's many things happening.
No, that sounds so exciting. So everyone watching this video, please support Joel, buy his amazing books. There is something for everyone in his category. Also, if you are curious about improving your poetry or even starting poetry, please look at his courses and what he does offer, because honestly, I think you'd be mad to not. He's full of helpful ideas. And also any schools, kindergartens, libraries, I do urge you, please call Joel. He's absolutely entertaining, and he loves to spread just the word of creativity, reading, everything in between. So please, Joel, if anyone would like to contact you today, how can they?
Just through my website is the easiest. So joelmckerrow.com is where you'll find me, and it's got all the stuff about the schools work that I do, and videos and Spotify links, and all the things are on there.
Joel, today has been such a pleasure. Do you have any final words of advice for people out there who would just love to be in your shoes, whether it be through poetry, writing, or just sheer entertaining?
I mean, I think my final piece of advice is that someone once said creativity is spelt R-I-S-K. Creativity is risk. And so the choice when we show up and risk, there's a whole lot of fear involved in that, where we're not only, and this is often why we get into those things called writer's block, whatever we call it, creative block and things like that, is because we're not just, when you show up at the blank page, you're not just showing up at the blank page, because so much of our creativity has been intertwined with our personhood and our relationships and the way we see ourselves and our fear and all that kind of stuff. And so if we follow, like Brene Brown said that 80% of us adults went through like a shaming or shutdown moment in our high school years. And 50% of those, in her research, she found, was all to do with creativity. So when we show up at the blank page, not only are we facing down the blank page, we're facing down our childhood shamings. Like, that's why the fear's there. That's why that's why we find it so hard sometimes. But to continually do that, to show up, to sit and do the work, to write the poetry or the book or whatever it is, even though you feel like it's bad, that truly is the only way you're going to get better. It's the only way you're going to take the bad poetry. I write tons of bad poetry. I come back to it a week later, a month later, and then I do my edits on it, and I find where the magic is within it. So my encouragement would be, show up, at the blank page every day, face off against those fears, challenge yourself to write, even when you feel it's bad. And as that, the beautiful thing I think to finish with, the beautiful thing I think about creativity is because creativity is so intertwined with all the different parts of us, our relationality, our emotionality, our self-growth. I think when we choose to sit down and step forward, step over that wall of fear and do the thing anyway, when we step forward in our creative risking out of our creative blocks, then I think we're also actually learning how to step forward in all the other stuckness areas of our life, like all the areas we've gotten stuck in terms of our relationships, our whatever, whether you're a single person, a married person, with a partner, with your kids, parenting, in all those areas where we are stuck. I think creativity and showing up, being fearful but being brave and stepping through and creating, it helps us to step forward and be vulnerable and honest and authentic and risk in all areas of our life. So I think the creative enterprise brings about beautiful things in terms of creativity, but also actually it heals our lives. It really does.
And by the sounds of it, the person you owe it to the most is the childhood version of yourself. So
Yeah, absolutely.
please don't let fears of the past stop you from doing anything now. Joel, those are absolutely inspiring and amazing words. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I really hope there's a part 2 to this conversation, because I can't see where you go next. I can't wait to see where you go next.
Thank you. I'm excited. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks. All right.